And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Resignation watch, checking the time clock. Not sure he's going to make it till morning, but if he does, well, Congress will be there to vote his behind right out the door tomorrow. Because here's the thing. Republicans are now finding a bit of a conscience. Or, more likely, they're figuring out that their political futures are going to be what is on the line here. The American public, seeing what happened on January 6th, never wanting that to happen again, are, well, the sane and rational are revolting. And this is the fact that you have Liz Cheney, the number 3 Republican, and a Cheney, by the way, saying that she will vote for impeachment. That is huge. The fact that Mitch McConnell has come out and said he's not against it. He's not going to stop it. He's not going to delay it. He's not going to sit it on the desk. He's not going to whip any votes, but he's going to let it go forward. That is huge. And there have been a number of Republicans who have come out and said, you know what, he's got to go. Now, as you remember, and I've been saying this for the last 4 years, the only way the Republican Party, the only way this country gets saved, if you will, is by the Republicans finding a soul. The Republican Party finding a soul and, well, saving themselves, but also the country as well. Because it's going to be them. It's going to be their conscience. It's going to be, are there any statesmen left there? Are there any people with the courage to step forward and say, we've gone too far? We're going to see that over the coming days. And like I said, Liz Cheney being one of the first to come out and say, you know, going to vote for it. Now, Donald Trump had his little shindig down at the Alamo, which I found very interesting today. But again, not taking responsibility for anything. And in fact, you know, and you got to love the fact that he still believes he did nothing wrong. He said that, you know, people thought what he said was totally appropriate. Totally appropriate. Yeah, come to the Capitol and tear the damn place down. Totally appropriate. He said that it's not his rhetoric was not a real problem. He said the real problem, and again, you got to love the pivot. The real problem was those Democrats and those blacks. Yeah, he went there. He went right there. Because he claims that everybody to the T thought he was totally appropriate in what he said. And it was all the fault of Antifa and, you know, all that stuff. And you got to love the whataboutisms, and you got to love the he's as clean as the driven snow. You know, virgin fresh, if you will. But here's the thing. Now that it looks like there are going to be a number of Republicans in the House and some in the Senate who are going to vote for impeachment, and Mitch McConnell's not going to be the backstop, evidently hasn't taken Trump's phone call in a couple of weeks. This could be that moment where impeachment is quite likely going to happen. And if you remember the reason, if you remember from history, the reason Nixon resigned was because impeachment was imminent. You don't want to be impeached and removed, so he resigned. He resigned and had Gerald Ford pardon him. Now, the resignation watch is based solely on Mike Pence. Now, Mike Pence, in my view, is a coward. He should have come out already and said, we've got to pull this guy out of here. We've got to pull the trigger on the 25th Amendment. Even though I personally have said I don't want to see that, he should have, as a matter of what's good for the country. But he has said today, nope, not going that way. He's told Nancy Pelosi, he's told everyone not invoking the 25th Amendment. Impeachment still planned for tomorrow. I personally don't think the 25th Amendment is a viable option. Tell you why. The 25th Amendment is about diminished capacity. I don't believe Donald Trump has any defense to diminished capacity. I believe he knows what he's doing. I believe he's wanted this violence. I believe he's courted this violence. He's been dancing with the devil the entire time. And now there's no saving your soul. You are responsible. You own this. You built this monster. It is yours. I want to see him impeached. I want to see him tried. I want to see him convicted. I want to see him removed. Even if it is at 11:59 on January 20th, even if it is that 1 minute, I still want that to happen. And look, even if it takes a little bit of time into January, still think that's worth doing. Because it's going to send the message. And I think Bob Casey, senator from Pennsylvania, hit the nail on the head. He said, quote, failing to hold those responsible for the insurrection accountable would be a profound injustice and give a green light to future authoritarians. And I agree with that. And someone asked me today, why bother? It's only a couple of days. Let him hibernate. He's not going to do it again. Kind of like Susan Collins says, oh, he's learned his lesson. It's this. There's got to be consequences. You've got to send the message for the future that we are not going to tolerate this, and that no matter how high you are, no matter how wealthy, no matter how well connected, no matter who you are, you do something like this, you are held accountable. I think that's pretty simple. Now understand the moment that we're in. I think most of us don't quite grasp the gravity of the moment. In fact, a couple of people I talked to today, were like, what's the big deal? Okay, they had the little rumble in the Capitol. Things are back under control. Let's move on. Any idea how close we were to having the Senate as hostages? Members of the House as hostages? You had people showing up in full military garb with zip ties ready to take captors. Can you imagine what would have happened had they found representatives and who knows what they would have done? They beat a policeman. Now remember, these are people who are the Blue Lives Matter people. These are the people who got the blue flags on the back of their car. These are the people who in their front yard put, we support the police, except when we're bashing them in the head with fire extinguishers. Can you imagine what would have happened if they'd have pulled one of the Nancy Pelosi? You've got a congresswoman who's giving the location. They've moved Nancy Pelosi from the chambers. Go get her. It's crazy. And I've had conversations with legislators, and I've had people tell me of conversations they've had with legislators across this country who are afraid for their lives. They're buying bulletproof vests. In fact, I found out today that, in Congress anyway, they can expense bulletproof vests like staplers or like copy paper. Gonna go to Staples and get some copy paper. I'll need some toner. Give me a couple of highlighters. Yeah. And check and see if they got any bulletproof vests on sale. It's crazy the moment we're in. You've got legislators who are, they don't get Secret Service. All because these lunatics have had a leader in the White House who has stoked their anger and given them permission to be what they are. We're seeing reports every day. Just today there was a report, a guy with a truckload of guns near the White House. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So when I see this, it makes me go, we've got to crack down hard on this. We see reports, the FBI, they knew. The FBI knew. The leadership in our government said, no, it's not a big deal. They're good people. They're like us. They would never do something like this. Even though every time we turn around, we heard, we're gonna stack up bodies. There was tons of heated rhetoric. And I don't know about you, but heated rhetoric is followed by heated action. And that's what we saw. Now, history will remember Representative John Katko as the first House Republican to back impeachment for Donald Trump. Like I said, Liz Cheney, the number 3, said she's in favor of it. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, I'm kind of watching what is left of Republican social media, of these radical social media folks. Someone like Tomi Lahren from Fox News, who is angry as can be at Mitch McConnell, tweeting out, "Oh, Mitch, the road you're headed down isn't one you want to be on. If you support impeachment, I can promise this will be your last term in office. All the RNC money in the world won't get you reelected." Because the institutional Republicans are saving their behinds, the radicals are all scurrying. And understand, Mitch McConnell is an institutionalist. He is somebody who's not going to. He's going to use the Tomi Lahrens and the radicals, but he's not one of them. He's about money. He's about keeping cash in his pockets. He's about making his rich buddies more money. Which is why, again, I go back to, you saw the National Association of Manufacturers. You saw some of the big private equity groups. You saw some of the big banks. You saw big corporations coming out saying, "Oh, whoa. We got to calm this down," because it's going to upset their ability to rob us blind. But it's interesting to watch how the right is eating itself, because there are those who understand that they had real power. They controlled the steamroller. And there are those who are just, they just want to tear what up. They want to break things. They want to shoot things. They want war. These are people who have been angry and have been given platforms like right-wing talk radio for years to vent and to grow even angrier. And now they want blood. Literally. And they have been whipped up into a frenzy over the last 4 years by Donald Trump and his band of merry minions. And I love the fact that this lawyer, this Lynn Woods, who, along with Giuliani and Sidney Powell and the rest of the the Manny Moe and Jack of legal firm, the great story today came out that a judge in Delaware, a Superior Court judge, has reportedly suspended Lynn Wood. And it's no more ability to practice, because the line that was there was fantastic. Evidently, the line went holding Lynn Wood accountable for a toxic stew of mendacity, prevarication, and surprising incompetence. Just amazing. And this judge went through and said, it's just bull. Almost said it. It's just bull. It's terrible stuff. And I've been wondering, when do we hold these lawyers accountable for going into courtrooms and trying to do what they've done in these kangaroo courts? And for me, I'll be honest, the next several months, because trust me, this ain't going away. You've now got the FBI all with egg on their face, because and look, all of the Homeland Security, all of the Capitol Police, all of those institutions who don't like to be drawn out in the public and don't like to be seen as failures. The fact that people were able to gain access to the Speaker's office and to the chambers and control the Capitol, kind of one of those moments where you go, major fail. Major fail. Now, they don't like it. Not happy. And there's going to be a crackdown. So I would suggest any of the flag-waving, gun-toting, Bible-throwing, Christian, Trumpkins, what's left of your social media, I would scrub. All of those hate messages, all of those threats, might want to go back and try and delete. Although, trust me, there is a researcher who saved everything you wrote on Parler. So everything you've ever put on Parler, this researcher has, for historical purposes, so that in 100 years, people are going to be able to go back and see just what kind of a nitwit, moron, idiot you really were and what kind of stupidity you wrote down. And I think that is fabulous. I think history will remember the cowards and the traitors and the people who caused this and wanted this. So congratulations. If you thought you were a nobody, history might remember you. Except it's probably not going to be for what you want it to be remembered for. So I would suggest, if you've got some social media, maybe you need to do some cleaning up. And understand, over the next several months, there's going to have to be an awakening and a reckoning. Because there's no healing, there's no moving forward, there's no unity. I love how the right is calling for, we need a moment of calm and a moment of unity. This isn't how you come together. No, this isn't how you come together. This is how we first hold people accountable, find out how and why this happened, and make sure it never happens again. Then, maybe then, we talk about unity. We talk about togetherness. We talk about bringing everybody back to the fold. Look, if you say right now, hey, wow, and I met somebody who said, look, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't who I thought we were. This isn't what I wanted. I believe in, boom, 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 boom. I don't believe in tearing up our Capitol. I don't believe in defecating on the floor. I don't believe in, go down the list of atrocities that happened. Then we can talk. And then let's talk about how we move forward in a more constructive way. But if you're going to hold on to, no, everything, the election was stolen, it's fraudulent. I look at my representative, Scott Perry, who was elected by the same system that he claims was fraudulent. Do you see the irony in that? So we've got a lot of work to do, and it's going to take time, and it's going to be painful, especially for those on the radical right who think they can do no wrong, who think that, well, they're entitled. Going to be very interesting. And by the way, some other good news that I wanted to just quick hit in here. The AP reported that the ex-governor of Michigan, Governor Rick Snyder, he and others are going to be charged in the Flint water scandal. So things are just getting better and better. Got to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
American, then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case National Labor Relations Board versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. This case declared that the National Labor Relations Act of 1935 was indeed constitutional. Also known as the Wagner Act, it is a key statute that provides the legal basis for private sector workers to organize, collectively bargain, and to go on strike. Jones and Laughlin Steel, the fourth largest steel producer in the country at the time, had fired several workers trying to organize with the Steel Workers Organizing Committee in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania in 1935. The NLRB had originally ruled against the company and ordered the workers reinstated with full back pay. But J&L refused, arguing that the act was unconstitutional on the basis that the federal government did not have the right to regulate interstate commerce. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that labor management disputes did affect interstate commerce and thus were subject to federal regulations. Historian James Pope notes that the statute was upheld only after a massive wave of worker militancy, punctuated by the spectacular 6-week sit-down strike at General Motor plants in Flint, Michigan, demonstrated what might have happened if the court decided the case differently. And in his book, The Last Great Strike, Little Steel, the CIO, and the Struggle for Labor Rights in New Deal America, legal scholar Ahmed White adds that the case was decided only after 2 years of legal uncertainty. Before Jones and Laughlin was decided, CIO unions were already negotiating and signing collective bargaining agreements. Ruling the Wagner Act constitutional has nonetheless benefited millions of workers for decades. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @LaborHistoryIn2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So more than 300 historians are calling for Trump's impeachment and removal. You know, when you get these guys out of the libraries and from behind the stacks to sign a letter to say, hey, maybe the president should go, maybe the rest of us who don't go to those places should probably pay attention. I got to tell you, I think that's a huge, huge thing. And these are going to be the people who are going to be writing in the future of how we got here, why this happened, and how we got out of it. I'm here to share some thoughts on maybe how we got to this point, why this happened, and how we get out of it. I've asked Nina Jankowicz to come talk with us. She's the author of How to Lose the Information War, and also probably the greatest title I've ever seen, Disinformation Fellow at the Wilson Center. Nina, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So let's start with that. How'd you score the title of Disinformation Fellow? That is fabulous.
Well, I had been at the Wilson Center for a couple of years working with their Russia program, and there was a new opportunity to do some work around disinformation. I had already been writing about this, and that's the title they slapped on me, but I think it's a pretty great one. And I kind of wish that it were Counter Disinformation Fellow, because it kind of makes it sound like I'm spreading disinformation, but I can assure your listeners that tonight we will be all truth and nothing but.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, I look at this administration and the reality is everything that Trump ran on and it seems like disinformation. This guy is a master at sucking the news out of the news cycle into his realm. And as I said at the beginning, I met a guy who is clearly having a crisis of conscience on how did we get here and, why did this happen? So let me throw that out there. I mean, it's a huge question. How did we get to this moment?
Yeah, it's a long story. I think part of the reason we didn't take the threat of violence seriously on Wednesday is because it was kind of just a drip, drip, drip over time that kind of froze into a larger snowball, if you will. If you go back to 2015, 2016, the seeds of what we're seeing today started with the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, where some Trump supporters and folks who really just vehemently despised Secretary Clinton started the theory that she and other prominent Democrats were trafficking in children and engaging in pedophilia in the basement of a DC pizza parlor, a non-existent basement, I should add. There is no basement in that pizza parlor. I've been there. That, your listeners probably remember, inspired a man to go with several weapons and try to liberate those kids, only to be arrested by the authorities. And that was the kernel of what we now know as QAnon. That was the basic theory that has now swept up so many people. And QAnon has also kind of been a snowball of its own conspiracy theory, tacking onto QAnon, especially now during the pandemic, while people are online more, they have a high level of distrust, they're fearful, things are uncertain. We're seeing all sorts of conspiracy theories that people are finding via social media. So they might be in a QAnon group, and then suddenly they're recommended a group that's looking at anti-vax conspiracy theories, or they're looking at information about Hunter Biden and his laptop, his alleged laptop, let's say, or they're looking at vote rigging conspiracies, right? People have been primed for this. Social media companies essentially lead them to more and more extreme content. And there are unfortunately people in Congress and probably in state legislatures as well, certainly in the White House, who are all too happy to share dis and misinformation, sometimes creating it themselves for their own personal political gain. And they also engage in what I call information laundering. So you'll see a disinformation narrative come in from, let's just say, like a not super reputable source. And then by repeating it in the halls of Congress, for example, they're giving it legitimacy. They're amplifying it and saying, well, if my congressman is talking about this, Joe might say, then certainly there should be some shred of truth to it. And that's why we are where we are today. You can't just pin it on social media. You can't only pin it on those who are kind of opportunistically using disinformation. You also have to give some blame to our atrophying media environment and and frankly to the crises that have contributed to this sense of distrust. But it's certainly a difficult situation.
Yeah, I'd like to throw in there the moneyed interests who fund all this stuff.
Oh, sure,
and
absolutely.
the billionaires who have created the infrastructure around this, going back, into the 50s with the John Birchers, all the way through the Tea Party movement. You go through the 70s where you had this, we got to save free enterprise. By invading colleges and media and creating this echo chamber of media think tanks, all of this, and of course right-wing politicians, to where you have this cesspool of information that just keeps churning, where they make their own disinformation up and then regurgitate it to where they have their own alternative facts. And, surprisingly, we found out a lot of things about the real world from this administration because they were the first ones who were out and open about how bad things are.
Yeah, the money part of the equation, I think, is really important. When we talk about foreign disinformation in particular, the money trail is often what we talk about shutting off. And if we were able to shut down the financing of these operations, then we'd be able to shut them off as well. These things aren't cheap. And I think, especially on the right, although I do have to say there absolutely is disinformation on the left as well. Right now it is much more on the right, though. The right is much more well-financed. They can produce, these kind of flashy looking infotainment sort of products. And those appeal to people on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you just have somebody's meme that they slap together in Microsoft Paint. And for some reason, those get shared millions of times on Facebook because people aren't doing their due diligence online. And I have to say, especially older individuals who kind of treat any social media as, something that's been moderated. They're used to having a gatekeeper for their media. And the polling shows that older individuals are more susceptible to disinformation, that they're not really doing due diligence, lateral reading, and checking their sources. So that's hugely important as well. But I think as much of an advocate for media literacy as I am, that's not going to get us out of the crisis that we're in at this moment.
No, you're right. And for me, everything comes back down to the money. It's always follow the money and who benefits from this. Obviously the money's on the right now because corporate America wants to make their profits, which is why I've been pointing out the fact that the National Association of Manufacturers just doesn't come out and say Trump should resign because they care about democracy. They care about their profits. They care about Wall Street more than anything, and which is why you're seeing corporate America throwing Trump and the Republicans to the wolves, and why the Republicans are trying to save their souls.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's walk back on this a little bit because, there are a lot of people who go through this administration and say, well, right off you started with the Russia hoax. Was the Russia thing a big hoax?
No. So let me give you a little bit of background about me. I studied abroad in Russia twice when I was in university and then in grad school. I worked for an organization that was a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization trying to help Russian democratic activists, political parties, election monitors, et cetera, civil society organizations. And then for a year, I advised the Ukrainian government on strategic communications after the war with Russia started. This was part of a Fulbright grant, so I was there on behalf of the U.S. government. In all of that work, it became really clear to me that we were missing something big, which was that Russia had already begun in Central and Eastern Europe, not just in Ukraine, but in countries like Estonia, since 2007, had been using information as a type of asymmetrical warfare. Now, Russia isn't a particularly rich country right now. Their military is formidable, but certainly doesn't, hold a candle to the U.S. military. And how can they exact influence over countries like the U.S. or blocks like the European Union? Information is a huge way to do that. And that's what they've tried to do over the past 10 to 15 years. It's not just in the United States. Again, you can look at Estonia, at the Republic of Georgia, Poland, Czech Republic, Ukraine, and beyond. And there's a pattern of this behavior. And that's what I talk about in my book, which came out in July. And so when people talk about Russia, Russian interference, Russian election interference, and disinformation being a hoax, that's such a uniquely American assertion, right? It's very chip on our shoulder, like, oh no, this doesn't happen. Talk to some Ukrainians, right, who are fighting a war now that is basically based on disinformation. Talk to some Polish people, some Estonians. This is very real to them. And the other thing is, it's always been something that they've understood, that online information can create offline effects. And only this week in America are we really fully coming to terms with that.
No, absolutely. And I keep coming back to this moment to where, I grew up in the 70s and 80s when the threat of mutual assured destruction was still a very real thing. I remember there being, get under your desks. There might be nuclear fallout. I don't know what the desks were going to do, but I remember that, we used to talk about that. I remember not trusting, the Soviet Union and therefore not trusting someone like Putin. I'm quite taken back that the Republican Party has really paired up, and so many people of my age group are going, "Oh yeah, the Russians are good folks. We're right there with them." I mean, Putin's our guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's flabbergasting to me. Just thinking about when I got started in my career, there are Republicans. The Republicans were the hawkish ones on Russia. John McCain, Mitt Romney. I mean, even Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham has gone to Ukraine multiple times. He is a Ukrainian patriot, if there ever was one. And yet we see these folks laundering, again, information laundering in the halls of Congress. Just a year ago at this time, we were going through that first impeachment trial related to Ukraine, and they were all too happy to forget the realities on the ground of what that phone call meant for Ukrainians and how it endangered their national security. And that's pretty shocking to me. I think there are a lot of principled Republicans who, as a foreign policy practitioner, national security person, Russia expert, I would consider working for, but they've kind of gone far afield, at least parts of the party have right now.
Yeah. I got to push back on one thing you said there, because I can't let it stand. I can't let there be a sentence with Lindsey Graham and Patriot in it. At this moment, it makes the hair on the
Ukrainian
back.
Patriot, right? No, I get it, and he's changed too. But it's true that he went to Ukraine multiple times with bipartisan congressional delegations to meet with Ukrainian officials and really support Ukrainian democracy. It's hard to imagine in this day and age, but that was in as early as 2016, as recently as 2016. I was living there at the time, and I remember that last Codel with I think he was there with Senator Klobuchar and possibly McCain at that point.
Yeah. Now let me ask you,
Crazy.
Is there a moment where maybe we come back to our collective sanity? Is there a moment that you see? I mean, you study this stuff, because look, I go back to this one person that I've met who's got me thinking a little bit that maybe there are others out there who in this moment are having a crisis of conscience over this isn't who they envision themselves to be. Do you see that there's a way for sanity to come back, and maybe we solve some of the conversation around what happened with Russia and the Ukraine, and maybe we find some facts that we can agree on instead of, people throwing, it's a hoax, it didn't exist, it's all a big witch hunt. Is there a point where we get past this, do you think?
I think a lot of that depends on the tenor of the national conversation. So I am generally pretty optimistic about this stuff. Not this week, though. It's really hard to be optimistic about this week. To see, that violence on Capitol Hill, as somebody who's lived in Washington for 10 years and, has testified up there and works with congressional staffers on a regular basis, to think about that open, accessible building, being defiled in that way is just heartbreaking. And then to see Republicans go and still vote to overturn the results of our democratic election, it's hard to come back from that. And I do agree with Senator Romney. He said the best thing that we can do to show respect to the people who are upset is to tell them the truth. And I hope that with this kind of spirit of unity in the Biden administration, which I do think they're trying to put forward there. And if anybody can do it, Joe Biden can, right? He has this long history of working across the aisle. That, we can start to speak those truths again without the political fallout that I think many Republicans feared if they got on the president's bad side. I think that leading by example is going to be extraordinarily important. I'm happy to see some rules being introduced on the House floor about types of information that can be shared. You can't share manipulated media. There are rules now on disinformation. I think that's good, and we need to start, enacting and censuring people who are doing that sort of thing. And we need to look at some tech regulation as well, because obviously the tech companies, leaving them to their own devices has not been good for democracy. It might have been good for their bottom line, but it has been bad for our civil discourse, and it has certainly polarized us. So I hope that we'll be looking at all those issues in this new Congress, but there's no quick fix. And just like this has been a drip, drip, drip over time, as I said at the beginning, it's going to take a little bit to melt this block of ice at this point.
So last question I've got for you, since you brought up social media, there's a lot of talk about Section 230, repealing that. Where do you find, as the disinformation fellow there at the Wilson Center, where do you see things going? Where do you see things where they should go?
So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about Section 230. People think it is a shield for tech companies, but as somebody who has studied counter disinformation legislation around the world, I can tell you that having that liability in place for tech companies, or having that limited liability in place, means that actually they're going to do less censorship and more protection of free speech. In Germany, they have a really harsh fine for any hate speech or disinformation that's reported. It has to be removed within 24 hours. And what that leads to, although it sounds good in theory, is the tech companies just en masse taking down anything that might be against the law. And that leads to more censorship. So I think Section 230 has to stay. What we need more of is oversight and transparency over the tech companies. So we don't need to take them at their word about what they're leaving up, what they're taking down, what they're even finding. Because right now, if I had to wager, I would say that a lot of it is the most problematic content is found by journalists and researchers like me. And I don't want to be doing their work for them. I'm not getting paid enough for that, right? So we need some accountability, and Congress can put that into practice rather than upset the free speech balance here. What we need is just more insight into what's going on in those conference rooms while they make these decisions.
Yeah, and I would also add in there, I'd like to see a level of personal responsibility thrown in this. I'm sorry, some nitwit in his underwear in the basement, just spewing the most vile nonsense, should be at some level held accountable for his words. I mean, when I was a kid, you said somebody stupid, they smacked you for it. At least you got something. Now it's, people can say the most vile things to you and there's no recourse. So I think that's got to be part of it.
And go ahead.
No, I was just about ready to wrap up. We got a final thought?
Yeah, well, just one quick thought is that in countries like the UK, they're thinking about introducing responsibility for the CEOs of these platforms for the content that is placed on there, especially if there's like really vile stuff. So that's another level of responsibility we could think about. Yeah,
I'm a big personal responsibility guy. Nina, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Rick.
Good stuff. Nina Jankowicz, author of How to Lose the Information War. She's also got a great title, Disinformation Fellow, there at the Wilson Center. We'll get links out. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith
Show. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt reestablished the National War Labor Board, just a little over a month before the United States had entered World War II. In the days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Congress voted to join the global conflict. Soon after the war was declared, the president brought together representatives from both business and labor. The president won commitments of no strikes or lockouts during the conflict. He wanted further assurances, however, that the great industrial war machine would continue to run smoothly. He looked back on how labor disputes were handled during World War I as a model. During that earlier global conflict, President Woodrow Wilson had set up a National War Labor Board. President Roosevelt kept the same name for his board, but charged it with even more sweeping powers. The board consisted of 12 members. 4 from labor, 4 from business, and 4 from the general public. But the overall composition of those selected tilted in favor of business. Any labor dispute that might impact the war effort was sent before the board. Since practically the entire United States economy was part of the war engine, this gave the group significant power. In establishing the board, President Roosevelt declared the national interest demands that there shall be no interruptions of any work which contributes to the effective prosecution of the war. The board played a decisive role in setting wages for many workers during the war. Labor protested the hardship of stagnant wages, as the raises determined by the board did not keep up with the cost of living, as prices were driven up by wartime scarcities. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as you know, every other Sunday I do a Q&A over on the platform called ThinkSpot, and they're they label themselves a center-right to right-leaning platform. And the reason that I've done that is I believe that we've got to start talking to each other. We've got to find common ground. We've got to eventually find unity once we get past holding people accountable for what happened on January 6th. But one of the things that keeps coming up is, what do we give Donald Trump credit for? And I've said the only thing I really give him credit for is that he brought attention to what's been going on in China, our horrible trade policies, currency manipulation, that he's not really done anything about. I've given him credit for that, and I have. The problem is he hasn't done anything productive in my view. And the hope is that we push, we organize, we continue to move forward to make Joe Biden pick this up. Because I'll tell you, my fear of Joe Biden is his original statement was China's not a problem. I think it is. And here to share some thoughts on where we go and maybe what the Biden administration is going to do as we try to build our country back better. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come back. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's always good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start first with you're in D.C., January 6th, horrible event. I wanted to get your thoughts, your experience real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just as shocked as anyone. I will say that something like that could happen in our nation's capital. You just you imagine that perhaps as a work of fiction or in some country with a lot of instability, but never here. And I say as someone who worked on Capitol Hill for a dozen years, including in the Capitol building, that I cannot imagine the terror, the insecurity that the people there felt. And I think everybody involved, from the instigators to those who were there, needs to be brought to justice swiftly and unequivocally. And that as America, we can speak with one voice about what led us into this, which was some incredibly misguided belief that the election could somehow be both rigged and then overturned. And that it was also okay to try to use force to stage a self-coup, essentially, and shattering all the norms. And so we have to reclaim that. And that's a job not for just elected Democrats or elected Republicans. It's a job for all of us as citizens to move forward. And I think it will be helpful to unite around a common agenda. But I think you can only do that successfully if there is also accountability and responsibility from top to bottom along the way.
Absolutely. No, and this is what I've been saying all along. Look, I'm all about unity. I'm all about let's get things done. Let's get the roads paved. Let's get people's lives better. But in this moment, the gravity of this moment tells us that we can't move forward until people are held accountable from top to bottom, and no one getting a pass.
Yeah. Well, a couple of encouraging signs, and who knows what will happen here, but it sounds like that Biden and McConnell have had some conversations about proceeding on parallel tracks if there is to be an impeachment trial and confirmations at the same time. And Rick, let's just be honest with folks. You know, some Republicans will look and say, well, the Democrats wanted to impeach Trump, so I'm not going to work with them. Those Republicans were probably not going to work with Democrats anyway. They're looking to secure their shot at a majority in 2 years. They have no interest in working with the Biden administration to advance a progressive agenda or an agenda to address income inequality or to make major investments in working people in this country. And so it is, you know, I think maybe perhaps the Senate until Democrats are, you know, get the certification in Georgia and are seated, that we can do both, do work on behalf of the country and hold the president accountable for his actions here as we look ahead in the coming days and weeks here.
Right, because sadly, as we're focused on this right now, there are so many other problems going on. We're in the middle of a raging pandemic. I look at California, which right now is a mess. And we haven't gotten vaccines into people's arms fast enough. And then there are all of the other problems, the joblessness, the homelessness, the hunger, all of the things that right now are not being taken care of because we don't have any leadership. Our government is kind of in this flux to where I think decisions have to be made. And obviously January 20th, Joe Biden will be sworn in. He will take the oath of office, and then maybe we get to go forward.
Yeah. That's certainly my hope. And, you know, something that that former President Obama said during the campaign that I will say really resonated with me, and I don't believe this was a partisan statement at all, what was that, you know, Trump, you know, he knew he wouldn't agree with Obama's policies, but at the same time, he hoped he would grow into the job and he would care about it. And as Obama said, he never put in the work. I mean, you know, he did a couple things here or there on some issues that he cared about. He did some really lasting damage, but really difficult, challenging circumstances like the pandemic or try to achieve an economic recovery just seemed beyond his capability or his interest. And so I think that any American, whether or not they supported Joe Biden, should be thankful that at least there's an administration coming in that exudes competence and a mission and will be able to move things forward in a way that we haven't seen, frankly, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm hoping, and for me, I'm hoping for a big infrastructure bill, and we start rebuilding our infrastructure. And a big part of that, if we do get to begin to build back better, and do the infrastructural improvement, is our trade policy with China. And this is where, as I said at the beginning, I agreed with Trump. I agreed with the use of tariffs. I agreed that it had to be done. I think he's made this situation worse. Our trade deficits are worse. We're more dependent and we're more isolated in the world because of his antics. And Joe Biden's got a bigger mess to clean up. I hope he's up to the task, and I hope he sees the gravity of what the Chinese situation is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer on China, Rick. I think you and I would agree to that if there was, you know, we would have figured it out a couple decades ago. And, you know, Biden and the vast majority of Democrats and Republicans at the time thought that the right approach, you know, a little over 20 years ago was to allow China to join the World Trade Organization and hope that economic growth would beget more openness and democracy, or at least tolerance of democratic institutions and more global cooperation. And that obviously hasn't been the case. Now, I think to his credit, Joe Biden made an attempt to get to know Xi Jinping when they were both vice presidents. And Biden spent probably more time with Xi Jinping outside of perhaps a U.S. ambassador to China than probably any other U.S. politician. And so he knows him, and he, I think, now looks at Xi as being a nationalistic thug. in his own words. And I don't think that you will see a Biden China policy look anything like an Obama China policy or a Clinton China policy or a Bush China policy. It also won't look like a Trump China policy. I think that there'll be some sanctions. There will be some things with teeth. I think there's some issues that Joe Biden will care about that Donald Trump didn't as much. And I mean workers' rights. I mean China's role in climate and carbon pollution. I mean human rights, like the fate of the Uyghur population in Western China, where there's a cultural genocide going underway and forced labor. Democracy being undermined in Hong Kong. And so I think that Biden will have a larger set of issues. And I'm just touching on them. I think subsidies, industrial overcapacity, these are all things that I think Biden understands are real challenges, and that labor has expressed to Biden as being real challenges as well. And so I know that this is an issue that Biden, his advisors understand is largely going to define their foreign policy in the years ahead. And they will need an economic policy to counter that. And one thing that does give me hope, Rick, is that I think Biden understands that the primary way to do this is to build strength from within through investing in our workers, investing in manufacturing, investing in a clean energy future, and doing it in a way that makes us more competitive, that makes us more resilient, that's bringing some key supply chains back to the United States for things like electrification, electric vehicles, and national security needs, so that we're better able to have these conversations with China without feeling so leveraged, like we do now. And so obviously this is a big priority for us as we're moving forward. But I think that certainly some of Trump's advisors, Mike Pottinger, who resigned from the National Security Council staff just within the last week or so, have been spot on about China, and that shouldn't be dismissed. And so we'll have to build out a better, more durable framework, one that's much more strategic. Very well for anyone.
Right. Do we go back on the tariffs on Americans, on Chinese steel, for instance? Do we go back on those tariffs and do away with them? Do you see Biden doing any of that?
Yeah, I don't think Biden removes the tariffs until there is a solution in place that will stabilize the global steel markets and ensure there's not as much dumping and subsidies as there are now. Rick, unbelievably, China is making 57%, maybe up to 60% steel now, 60%. And it makes too much, too. And so whatever it does in the steel sector has a global impact, even if we're not importing a lot of steel from China directly. I think the challenge here is that it's probably going to take the European Union and Japan and some other countries together in concert with the United States dealing with China on this. But what Trump has done is we still have these tariffs on European steel, and not all European countries are good actors on steel. I just want to say that for the record. But it's going to be hard to have a unified position on China with our European allies if we're also have tariffs on their steel at the same time. And so those are some tricky issues to work through. But I know the steel workers, steel companies, ourselves, some key members of Congress, we've said to the Biden administration, you shouldn't throw out those tariffs, but we need to utilize the leverage therein to gain lasting, real change, because we know that they're not going to be up there forever, and they can't be up there forever. So we got to figure a way through this, and we do hope that Biden and Biden's team will make this a trade priority as we move ahead.
Right. Now, you a moment ago, you brought up the Uyghurs and the forced labor and the genocide that's going on there. And, for decades, I've been saying, we've been competing with basically slave labor. And now we know we're actually competing with slave labor. How do you compete with that? I mean, at some point, don't we, as a country, have to say we've got to figure out how to not do this? And as a globe, how do you pull them them into compliance when they've been so defiant?
Yeah, you've got to cut them off. And you've seen Trump took some baby steps with some particular companies. It's got to be dramatically expanded. We know it extends the slave labor. And Rick, I have to say, if people haven't seen these pictures, I mean, these Uyghurs are in things that look like concentration camps. I mean, and the women are being sterilized. And this sounds terrible and dystopian, but it is happening in China right now. And unfortunately, some of these people are making parts and are, spinning cotton that's going into clothes that people wear and products that people buy all over the globe. And it is an imperative that we put this to an end. So I think that, from a domestic perspective, we need to look at broadening those sanctions and banning those goods from entering the United States. We need to enlist our allies in that. The UK has taken some steps. I know the EU has been a little more cautious about this, but I also think that they understand what's at stake here. And so I do think we need to move forward and to ensure that we're reinserting American values into our economic policy rather than making it a kind of a real estate deal a la Donald Trump, where our values are just completely set aside. I think we need to reestablish that foundation. And at the same time, we can take advantage of the fact that we're making our economy more competitive through these domestic investments and win back some market share because we need to. We need some wins for American manufacturing workers. There are fewer manufacturing jobs today than there were when Donald Trump took office. Our trade deficit is higher today than it was when Donald Trump took office. And so I think Joe Biden can do better than that. I think he can do a lot better.
Well, it's a situation where, to use a Donald Trump frame, what do you got to lose? I don't think he can do any worse. Last question I've got for you in going forward, what are we expecting in the first 100 days to get our manufacturing base back? Are we expecting an infrastructure plan? What are you hearing is the rollout of those first 100 days?
Yeah, so just today, Senator Schumer issued a letter to his colleagues about priorities for Democrats. Again, once the elections in Georgia are certified and those senators are formally sworn in. And they do include immediately dealing with pandemic relief and making sure that there's adequate vaccine distribution, which to me, I understand and completely support as being the immediate acute priority, getting more money to people who need it, stabilizing businesses, and working on the vaccination program and keeping people safe. Okay, so that's step number one. Step number two, and Schumer said this in his letter, is that they do want to do infrastructure that will help manufacturing and also clean energy investments that will help manufacturing. He specifically mentioned manufacturing. And so this process is interesting, and I don't know exactly what form it's going to take because you may have committees that do work on this. But as you've probably discussed, there is this tool that the Senate Democrats will have called budget reconciliation, where instead of needing 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, which may be harder to achieve, quite honestly, they can do things with a bare majority. And maybe
then we can get some stuff done, and only then. But Scott, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. I look forward to having you come back and pick up more. This is going to be a long road. Hopefully you'll be here with us.
You bet, Rick. Thanks so much. Keep up the great work.
Appreciate the time. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. A very unusual army marched on Washington, D.C. Pro-labor Catholic priest Father James Renshaw Cox led the march. Father Cox had worked as a cab driver and steel worker before attending seminary and serving as a chaplain in World War I. After the war, as a pastor in Pittsburgh, he organized food assistance for those hit hard by the Great Depression.
As the number of unemployed grew, Father Cox came up with a new plan to help the suffering in his city. He organized Cox's Army, 25,000 Pennsylvanians who had lost their job due to the Great Depression. Cox led them from Pennsylvania to the nation's capital to demand a works program. Cox led them from Pennsylvania to the nation's capital to demand a public works program to put people back to work. The protest was the largest in Washington, D.C. up until that time. It was considered a great embarrassment to Republican President Herbert Hoover, yet the president still did not move to provide government assistance. Such inaction helped to usher in the era of Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency, whose New Deal policies included public jobs programs. The protest also spawned a popular saying for women of that day. According to the Associated Press, the men of Cox's Army ate 2,500 pounds of sauerkraut, 1,500 pounds of hot dogs, 11,000 apples, 650 gallons of soup, 450 loaves of bread, and 1,600 dozen of donuts and rolls during the protest. When cooking dinner for their families, women might explain, "I made just enough food to feed Cox's Army." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Are we back to the jungle? An animalistic society with roaming packs of foam-at-the-mouth beasts howling for the enthronement of their king? As witnessed in the ugly collapse of Donald Trump's presidency, his furious animalism was unleashed on America, revealing a soulless selfishness that he had written about years earlier in a book on corporate deal-making. In A Great Deal, he explained, winning is not enough. You crush the opponent. But wait, that's not fair to animals. In the real animal kingdom, the species that are the most successful survivors are not the beastliest, but the ones that work together in a sharing society. From ants to elephants, animals in the wild organize to hunt together, build homes, nurture and teach their young, spread their available food throughout the community, mourn lost ones, etc. They even vote. The real king of the jungle is the group, as has been found in communal societies as varied as meerkats, baboons, and bees. Whether primates or insects, such decisions as where to live and which direction to go forage are made by democratic consensus reached in a sort of caucus system. When several thousand honeybees, for example, split from a hive to form a new colony, they dispatch a few hundred scouts to find a new home. One by one, the scouts report back, doing unique waggle dances that describe what each found. Gradually, scouts decide what bees sight as best and synchronize their waggles accordingly. Once the scouts are doing the same dance, the whole swarm flies off together and settles into their new hive. This is Jim Hightower saying America has more to learn from bees than from Trump and his lifelong enthusiasm for a social order based on corporate power plays. The great hope for our society is not domination by the strong, but cooperation by all.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So more and more we're seeing stories of who's being arrested, who was in the crowd on January 6th. And look, some surprising people. This Cleet Keller, a 5-time Olympic medalist and former teammate of Michael Phelps, evidently was one of the people that stormed the Capitol. Look, you're a medalist. How he got caught, how he was spotted. Evidently, he decided it was a good idea to wear the Team USA jacket. That kind of gave him away because there aren't an awful lot of those. Yeah. I'm also told that Chuck Norris wasn't there. There was a couple of pictures of him. Looked a lot like him. But I'll tell you, I'm interested to see how many of these people we can perp walk into courtrooms and hold accountable. And here to share some thoughts on what happened on January 6th and the infrastructure that caused this, that gave rise to this kind of insanity. I've asked our good friend Peter Montgomery to talk with us. Peter is a senior fellow over at the People for the American Way. They do this fantastic thing called Right Wing Watch. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
So let me start with January 6th. Surprised?
Yes and no. Not surprised that there was violence because that was being telegraphed. Like a lot of people, surprised and horrified at how poorly prepared the Capitol Police were, and really horrified and surprised to see people marauding within the Capitol, while constructing a gallows out front. I mean, it was really a pretty terrifying couple of hours there.
Yeah, I'm glad you went that direction because I can't tell you how many people have gone. So no, I was shocked. I was surprised. What were you surprised at? There was nothing to be shocked. The only thing that shocked me about Wednesday is that it didn't happen sooner.
Yeah, well, there have been plots, that I think the law enforcement has stopped sooner. The things like the effort to kidnap the governor of Michigan. So, it's law enforcement has known that the far right, the militias, white nationalists, that all these folks are a serious threat to the country. And when you combine that with the fact that, researchers who follow right-wing organizing online, were very clear about the threats of violence, planning specifically for storming the Capitol. So it's mind-boggling that there wasn't better preparation from the leadership to be ready for this. And the day before the storming of the Capitol, there was a day-long rally on Freedom Plaza, right on Pennsylvania Avenue, 7.5 hours of speakers, and it was a weird, toxic mix of Christian nationalism and Trump worship and threats of violence, including people talking about, you members of Congress, you better do the right thing. You better give Trump the election, or you're going to have an uprising from all the pissed off patriots in town. So they were preparing for this.
No, I mean it's really scary, and I think for a lot of people, I think seeing what that, as you said, the 7 hours of insanity, but what that brought the next day, I think I hope has awakened some people to go, all of that heated rhetoric is real. There are some real kooks out there, because as you've said, they've married this corporate religion and this this love of guns into this ideology that this toxic stew of ideological insanity that we saw come out on Wednesday. And even today there are still people saying that they're still organizing. They still believe Donald Trump's going to be inaugurated in March because we're going back to the way it used to be. There's still these groups out there doing this stuff.
Well, and even after the assault, even after Trump's extremely grudging public acknowledgement that there was going to be a transfer of power, there are still people who are part of the Pentecostal prophetic wing of Trump's religious rights supporters who are still insisting that this is not over, that it looks bad. And yes, we've exhausted all the legal options, but God can still intervene, and God will still intervene somehow to keep Trump in office. And there's a group of Trump's religious rights supporters that have been having prayer calls twice a week since the election, and I was the one that was on Sunday. They had about 5,000 people listening to, and being told. That this is a Red Sea moment. Christians in America are like the ancient Israelites. They got their back against the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army is coming, and there's no earthly way to stop it, but that's when God will step in.
You hear that, and you just go, wow, where do you go when the thing that's supposed to give us values and the thing that's supposed to humble us, if you will, is being used to divide, to enrage, and to cause violence. I'm in this moment where I'm looking at a sect of our religions who are extremists, and I would argue on their extremist terrorists. I look at some of the things that coming out of our military. We're now seeing, finally again paying attention to the extremism that's coming out of our military. That's this stuff has infected, a good portion of American life. Our law enforcement officials are infected by this. Is there a way forward? Do you see? I mean, without there being, mass arrests and the kind of things that I'm hoping are coming, is there a way forward?
Yeah, I think there is a way forward. It's interesting. Ben Jealous, who's the current president of People for the American Way, talks about having the discipline of optimism and hope. It's a discipline to look at the good things that are going on, including the Georgia elections, but also to see, in the wake of the assault on the Capitol, there has been a tremendous effort to identify the people who were leading the assault, who were committing the mayhem. Arrests are happening all over the country. That's good news. And I think, other people who are in local law enforcement agencies, who are local elected officials, they are being identified. People in, city councils and other places are trying to figure out the best way to hold folks accountable for having taken part in that. So I think there is, there was widespread disgust and revulsion at what happened. I think there is a strong and wide response to it. And, we just have to make sure that the accountability, that there is a persistent move to hold people accountable, that this is not kind of a once and done, or that somehow in the name of some bogus calls for unity that we can't hold people accountable. Because if you don't hold people accountable for this kind of stuff, this kind of political violence will only increase. And
Absolutely.
So, I
agree.
I think law enforcement, the military, we have to support investigations, and Congress can help make sure that those kind of investigations happen.
I've been kind of interested in looking at the social media posts of a lot of these so-called wannabe patriots, and it's kind of like like the old David Letterman stupid human tricks, where people were basically filming their own treason, which I thought was the one guy, the son of the Supreme Court justice from Brooklyn, New York, who basically had a police shield and a police vest on, and given interviews while in the midst of this invasion, and not thinking anything of it. I just seeing him arrested and held on $100,000 bond, I think is healthy for the country.
Absolutely, and I mean it is kind of stunning. I haven't known fully what to make of the fact that all these people were so gleefully live streaming their own criminality. And I think, it's a combination of, somehow belief that, they're the good people. They're not like the bad people, not like the Black Lives Matter people. And
right.
So their cause was just. I think it was a belief that, they thought that they were going to stop Congress from affirming Trump's victory. And so if they were successful in doing that and Trump was going to be president, well, certainly he wasn't going to punish them, that they would be heroes doing this good thing of putting Trump back in power. So, they were, what's the expression? Getting high on your own supply. I think.
Yeah, but I also think you add into that they've been told for so long that they're these uber patriots and you're a good, God-fearing American. They've been told that for so long that they were being pumped up. And I look at that Q nut from Colorado, that Lauren I can never say Boebert, who tweeted out on the day, today is 1776. These are the people who during the Tea Party years had the trifold hats going. These people believed they were revolutionaries. They were streaming this stuff because they wanted to document that they were the heroes. I truly believe that was the main portion of that.
No, I think you're right. They really were caught up in this vision of themselves as patriots. And, it's really, it all is grounded in the big lie that Trump won the election in a huge landslide, and, the evil people, the evil Democrats, the evil globalists, the evil, Chinese communists, you name it, all somehow combined forces to steal this from Trump and to steal it from his supporters. And, that's another piece of this that has to be reckoned with. There's a lot of Republicans and a lot of sort of traditional religious right leaders who have come out, saying how shocked they were and how aghast, and they would never support violence. But these are the same people who have been telling the lie that enraged people, that provoked this violence by making them believe that Trump, who they adore, had won the election by a landslide and was having it taken away from him, and that they were having their president they love taken away from him by fraud and theft. And on top of that, a lot of these same right-wing leaders had also been telling their supporters in advance of the election, if Trump loses, if Joe Biden wins, the republic is over. It's a communist takeover. Christianity will be criminalized. Churches will be shut down. All this fear-mongering that was just, totally lies, but it was an effort to frighten people into going out to vote. Well, if you hear that from people and you really believe that a Joe Biden victory means the end of the republic and the start of tyranny, maybe you would go join an assault on the Capitol if you really believe that.
Yeah, well, but again, Peter, they've been told this for so long, and I keep asking the question of the people who keep putting this stuff out, the pastors and the politicians and all of these people who are making money off of this, that they truly believe the rhetoric that they're spewing, or do they know it's a game and they're doing it for their political purposes? For me, clearly the person who's doing it for political purposes is much, much more vile. Neither of them good, but the person who's doing it for political purposes is much more vile. And I think that's what we see out of the people who are now trying to find a conscience and calling for unity, that they've danced with the devil and now they're trying to save their soul.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, a lot of, someone like Ted Cruz, he's a smart guy. He's a lawyer. He knows that 59 courts looked at and rejected all these bogus claims, and yet he was still out there, pushing these claims, trying to get the election taken away from Biden by disenfranchising millions of people in the battleground states, and justifying that with these claims that he knew had been investigated and debunked by media, by state election officials, including Republican election officials like in Georgia, and by the courts. So yeah, it was deeply cynical, and it's blown up in their face. And I really, there's a range of different kinds of investigations, and there are a few people, the president and some of those close around him, who might actually be criminally liable for inciting the assault.
Yeah, I know the Attorney General of the District of Columbia we talked about it yesterday, is looking into whether he can hold the president criminally liable for it.
Right, and then there's a whole lot of people who probably don't rise to the, it's a pretty high legal bar for incitement, but people like Ted Cruz and, the other members of the House and the Senate who voted to try to overturn the Electoral College results, they bear a huge moral responsibility, and hopefully they will be held accountable for that. politically. And in other ways, I've seen that. It's interesting. I think the revulsion at this is so widespread. There's sort of accountability coming from directions I hadn't even anticipated, like Simon and Schuster canceling Josh Hawley's book because they wanted nothing to do with him. Good for them.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I've been on this. The day of, I guess it was the National Association of Manufacturers came out and said that Trump has to resign, and then you had the banks, you had Goldman Sachs and some others saying that they're going to halt political contributions, and there's been a bunch of that. And I got to tell you, and maybe you'll agree or you'll disagree. I don't want to hear any of it from them because I believe that they're just as complicit in all this because they've funded this stuff. They've funded these AstroTurf groups like Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Works, who have been pumping this crap into people's minds for the last at least the last decade plus. Now is not the time to go, oh, now we want to save our soul. You should have been doing that all along. But I'm curious your thoughts on now corporate consciousness coming around.
Well, I think it's the same way you could say, that the move to knock Trump off social media was about 4 years too late. I think you're right. It makes sense to be clear-eyed about this, to not let this be a cheap grace thing that we let people off the hook for everything that they've done because of it. But even though I believe there is a great weight of more responsibility on people who funded and perpetuated these lies, I am glad that a lot of religious right leaders and Republicans feel compelled to disavow the violence because, I want their supporters to hear that from them because their supporters are probably also hearing from the even further right people who want to provoke more violence. So I think it's a good thing to have people distancing themselves from the violence, distancing themselves from the politicians who've enabled it. But, as of course, that doesn't mean we ignore the role they've played in building the infrastructure that made all this happen. I think it can be a both and. We can say, in the immediate thing, it's good that people from across the spectrum are stepping up to support, to support the arrest of people who carried this out, to support accountability against people who incited it and enabled it, and we can figure out where to move forward from there.
Yeah, but
and figure out sort of broader accountability for supporting the organizations that help spread these lies, because it's the lying. That's one of the things that's been most toxic about the Trump era, right? Is that the lies were so incessant and so broad and so deep that it just poisoned the well in so many ways. It made it hard for people to hear the truth, to get the truth, to believe anything other than what Team Trump was telling them. And there's a massive number of media outlets and politicians that have been absolutely complicit in that.
Yeah, in fact, it was almost a joke how many lies he was telling. There was a running count. The Washington Post had a running count of them. But I want to get your thoughts on how ill-prepared we were. Because, there was some, reports saying that the Capitol Police said, hey, we wanted to be more prepared. We were, we weren't giving the resources that there's a whole bunch of reasons, a lot of name blaming going on. But do you now see that these agencies like the FBI, like Homeland Security, do you now see them going, hey, we let this was a failure. We've now got to come down hard and we've got to really do a lot of very public arrests and a lot of very public kind of stuff to kind of give people confidence again. Do you see that coming?
I do. And I think, we're about to have a very different Justice Department, and that's a good thing. And, if the Justice Department was still going to be controlled, was still going to be under the Trump administration, the possibility for accountability for something like this would be very small. But we're going to have a new Justice Department. We clearly have members of Congress who are very keen in investigating what happened, why there was a breakdown in the defense of the Capitol. Obviously, there's a lot of good investigative reporting happening from the media. I saw that the FBI and the Department of Justice have actually created a sedition task force to sort of oversee the investigations of what happened and why. So I do think there's going to be a lot going on, and there's already have been a few heads have rolled at the Congress in terms of the the Sergeant of Arms and the head of the Capitol Police. But I think that also why were warnings ignored? Why were pleas for help rejected for so long? I mean, there's a lot of timelines and nailing down of the details that needs to happen, and I'm very confident that is going to happen because there's such intense interest in it from FBI, from the Department of Justice, from the congressional investigating committees. I think we're going to get answers.
Yeah, I have a theory, and my theory is the reason that the Capitol Police weren't better prepared and that the entire area wasn't better prepared is one, we'd had numerous exercises like this before. They had done it in Richmond, they had done it in capitals all across the country, and they've shown us what they were going to do. So we should have known that storming the Capitol was a possibility, but we didn't because, well, they're white people, and we don't believe that white people are going to do that.
I think that's absolutely a part of it. I think that
and I also think that they were probably better armed and better and the Capitol Police were outgunned.
Yes, no, I think it was definitely that it's white people, and that made a big difference in how I live in Washington. I saw the kind of mobilization that happened around the Black Lives protest. I see what happens normally for an inauguration or even for just a big rally. You see the way that law enforcement resources could be mobilized. So it's stunning that it didn't happen this time. And, I think there was all this concern about optics of, making it look like they thought Trump's people were going to be bad people. And I think also probably part of what we're going to find out, too, is that, there's a pretty good chunk of people in law enforcement who are on Trump's side, who saw Trump and his people as defenders of law enforcement, and so they could not imagine that they were going to get attacked by these people who are waving, Blue Lives Matter flags.
Yeah, and then they kill a policeman in the process. Last question I've got for you. This is we talk about how pervasive this right-wing ideology is, and I look at our Supreme Court. Finally, someone has paid attention that one of the justices, Clarence Thomas, his wife, is one of the key crazy people in this movement. Should it be concerning to the average everyday person that this kind of crazy is this close to our Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ginny Thomas's far right activism. She's out there, and she's been out there for a long time, and I have always found it troubling. And I'm glad it's getting more attention.
Yeah.
I'm also glad, for what it's worth, that the Supreme Court that we have did not go along with Trump's demands and the ridiculous arguments of his legal team, and that's also a good thing. It's not like I'm holding out a lot of hope for rulings we're going to get out of those conservatives in the future, but I think it is a good thing that they did not use the court to steal this election from Joe Biden, as Trump was demanding that they do. And that's why, some of the Trump diehards, consider them traitors the same way they consider Mike Pence a traitor. And, there's another one where credit's due. Mike Pence did not cave into the demands that he claim powers that he does not have under the Constitution to reject those electors. And he was under a lot of pressure from Trump and his legal team and right-wing activists to do that. So,
but it would have never held up. So it's not even one of those things that was even a possibility. But Peter, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. You guys do fantastic work. I hope folks will check out the website. The rightwingwatch.org website is priceless. People should go there. And also the People for the American Way website. We'll get links out on how folks can take a look at that. Peter, as always, great stuff, man.
Thanks. I always love talking to you.
Appreciate the time. Let's take a quick break. Stick around. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Last year was the hottest year globally on record, tying with 2016. And that wasn't the only climate record that was broken.
The world just keeps getting warmer. But 2020 also shattered the record for billion-dollar weather disasters in the U.S. Plus, fossil fuel industry shutting revolving door on Trump energy staffers.
They're too toxic even for the fossil fuel industry. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's very nice down in Georgia. People go back to Georgia all the time. In fact, they're kind of known for it. The devil moved back to Savannah so he could vote for Biden. I mean, he's the Prince of Darkness, but he's very concerned about global warming.
Well, that makes sense. This is your Green News Report.
If the Earth's already on fire, hell's not going to be that important.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I know it was one of the hottest years on record yet again, but before we get there, a disturbing story. The MAGA mob finds its way to the most upsetting places.
Yes, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Florida is investigating a video that was first reported by the Citrus County Chronicle that shows a manatee with the word Trump scraped into the animal's back. Now, officials say that the manatee appears to be unharmed, that the word was scraped into an algae coating on the animal, not its skin. But since manatees are protected endangered species, harassing them is punishable by prison and steep fines.
Good. Hope they catch him. Making manatees great again?
Ugh. Now on to the big news. 2020 tied with 2016 for the hottest year ever recorded globally since record-keeping began in the 1880s. That's according to Copernicus, the European Union's climate monitoring service. NASA and NOAA are expected to release similar results in coming weeks in another signal of the increasing impact of man-made climate change on the planet. 2020's record heat triggered extreme weather events around the world, with alarming heat waves that fueled record deadly wildfires in Australia, Siberia, and the western U.S. And it fueled the historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. And remember when parts of the Arctic topped 100 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yes.
The fact that 2020 tied with 2016 for the hottest year on record is especially remarkable, according to CBS meteorologist Jeff Berardelli.
We had a La Nina, which is a cool episode in the Pacific. In 2016, it was a super El Nino, so we would expect a heat record in 2016. We would not expect a heat record in 2020. Gives you an idea of just how quickly things are warming because of human-caused climate change.
Berardelli also notes,
the Paris Agreement wants us to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This year we're at 1.25 Celsius, so we're getting really close.
So, in other words, the Paris Agreement is supposed to keep us from rising more than 1.5 degrees above industrial times, and we are almost there already.
Yes.
That's not good.
No. And climate change disasters are costing the United States a lot right now. In 2020, the U.S. shattered its previous record for extreme weather disasters, costing at least $1 billion in damage each, according to NOAA. The prior record was $16 billion disasters in a year. Last year, we had 22.
Wow.
The costly damages included widespread wildfires in the West, multiple hurricanes in quick succession, including 4 in a row for beleaguered Louisiana, Louisiana, extreme heat waves, and the destructive Midwest derecho. Altogether, 2020's extreme weather disasters killed 261 people and caused nearly $100 billion in damages in a single year.
Wow.
NOAA said the new record shows the trend of growing disasters that, since 1980, have cost the United States more than $2 trillion in damages.
Good thing we didn't do anything about it. It was too expensive.
Globally, 2020's heat record brought storms, fires, and floods that killed more than 8,000 people around the world and caused more than $210 billion in losses. That's according to a new report by global insurance giant Munich Re. In Washington, the Trump Environmental Protection Agency on Monday finalized a rule setting the first ever greenhouse gas emission standards for aircraft engines. Yes, it is one of the few examples of the Trump administration acting to regulate greenhouse gases, but surprise, the environmental groups say the rule is so weak as to be virtually meaningless because it requires no action from the industry and provides no emissions reductions. Finally, some Schadenfreude news. Politico reports that Trump's incitement of last week's deadly siege on the U.S. Capitol by his supporters has reportedly succeeded in tarnishing the resumes of administration energy staffers who had been hoping to use their government experience to win lucrative jobs in the fossil fuel industry. But that revolving door may be slamming shut. One anonymous executive at an oil and gas company told Politico, quote, "We're not going to hire any Trump people. We're just not going to do it."
The Trump stink is even too smelly for the fossil fuel industry. Well done, Trump. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently, Bruce Willis, the Die Hard star, was photographed leaving a Rite Aid in Los Angeles, where he was asked to leave because he refused to wear a mask. And you go, one of these things where this is a guy, isn't he quarantining with the two families, him and Demi Moore, the ex-wife, and the new wife, in some kind of weird Instagram jungle of insanity where they've made kind of something out of it, because they're all staying safe, but yet going to go to a Rite Aid and refuse to pull the stupid bandana he had up around his neck, just being defiant. It's just insane to me, especially in California where things are, I guess, really crazy right now. And I know we're focused on, saving the republic. We're focused on, the sedition and the insurrection that happened last week. But damn it, things are getting bad. We can do more than one thing at once. And you would think John McClane would know better. Evidently not. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on just how bad things are getting, I've asked our good friend Dr. Kelly Sennholz to come back and share some thoughts on where we are with the virus update. Dr. Sennholz, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, good to hear from you.
So we got this idiot going, no, I'm not going to wear a mask. We've got evidently some COVID-idiot in Congress who refused to wear a mask. So while they were all, sequestered away, whoever it was, whatever Republican refused to wear a mask while being sequestered away, ended up giving it to a couple of other representatives. So good times.
I've been so angry. My blood pressure must be through the roof. But, regarding those Congress people who refused to put on a mask locked in a room with their others, it was actually more than one. And one of them turned out to have COVID. He didn't have symptoms. He didn't know he had COVID. He didn't know he was carrying it around. So this is a great example of why you need to wear a mask all the time when you're around people. You don't know if you have COVID. So you don't know if you're spreading it to someone else. And now this is a serious issue. One of them is 75 years old with cancer history.
Yep.
She could die.
No, absolutely. This is bad. And it made me think about, how much we've changed as a society over the years. Because, and this is not this isn't apples and apples, but I remember in college when living in a dorm where evidently one of the guys had crabs and gave it to everybody in the shower, and everybody knew who it was. Here's where the story goes: everybody knew who it was. And for the next month, every time he would come near the showers, people would snap him with towels and beat him. So it sent a message to everyone else: take care of your stuff. Don't infect the rest of us. I'm a big believer in, we know who this person is. There should be consequences.
I think there should be. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up. The consequences that everybody is thinking of for these Republican nuts are so infinitesimally small compared to what they've done. And I cannot stop all day long just thinking, what a bunch of racists. If any black person had done any of these things, they would be in prison. They are in prison for minor offenses.
Oh, we'd have shot them.
We have our leaders carrying on with sedition and treason and killing their fellow members. And everybody is like, well, I don't know if we should sanction him.
Yeah.
And
we need unity.
I'm shocked. I'm dismayed. It's Democrats doing it too, though. Democrats.
Oh, I know.
Two Democrats brought up a motion to sanction the people that have caused the attack on our White House. I'm like, I wanted to jump through my computer and scratch their eyes out.
Dr. Sennholz, understand, I have no faith in the Democratic Party or any of their members.
Oh.
None. They have shown me repeatedly that they're a circular firing squad, and that when you give them the keys to the steamroller, they roll it over their foot. So there's not a lot of hope coming from me at this moment. I hope they prove me wrong. I'm hopeful.
Oh, I cannot believe it. Like, we used to hang people for these things, right? Isn't that what they used to be? And then they toned it down to jail time.
Yeah, wouldn't that be the argument? Had Antifa, had Black Lives Matter, had anyone else done what they did, we would be convening firing squads.
I know. I heard Cori Bush do an interview, and she was just raging. And I thought, she's matching my emotion. I like that girl. And everybody was kind of shook up, like, well, she's getting a little. And I'm like, no, more of that. I want to see more of that.
No, I mean, there's a moment where you have to rise to this occasion. This, and I don't think most people get the gravity of this moment. This was, I don't think we understand how close we were to real chaos.
Up on Thursday with the authoritarian dictatorship.
Yeah.
We almost woke up last Thursday to an authoritarian dictatorship. If those kids or children running through our White House had not been incompetent or freaked out at the last minute, or I don't know what stopped them, but whatever did, if it had not, we would be waking up this morning to a dictatorship.
Under the flag of the Confederacy.
Under the flag of the Confederacy, and maybe a little Nazism thrown in.
Well, in Germany, the swastika flag, that's illegal. So what they use instead is the Confederate flag.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the international. That's the new international sign for hate, which is not surprising to me. But here we are in this moment, and look, all this stuff's really, really important. But we've still got this little pandemic thing that's going on, and the numbers keep going up, and yet nobody. In fact, I had to say no. I want to talk about this today. Nobody's talking about how bad things are getting.
Oh, it's so bad. And I would like to interject that we ask the press to please start calling it the genocide, not the pandemic, because I believe after today, there is no doubt that there was purposeful murder of 500,000 citizens to cause chaos to keep Trump in office and overthrow our government. What happened today is Secretary Azar went on and said, he said everybody under 65 and those with comorbidity and documentation determined by the governors need to get their vaccine right away. What he also said, there was a little highlight there, they've been withholding in storage millions of doses of vaccine. And today, basically, the writing is on the wall. After the failed coup, they're understanding that this isn't going to happen, that Trump isn't going to stay in office, that he's not going to get to be king of the medical system of the new country, whatever they were going to name it. I bet they had a name for it. I bet they had a name. They're starting to understand that it's not going to go. And so he came on and said he's releasing all the vaccine they've been holding. And I believe that we need to start referring to this as the genocide or the pandemic genocide, because I don't think there's any doubt at this moment that that's what it was. And also, I don't think that the fact that Biden set up a committee that has just started their work about 2 days ago to identify the source of the virus. Like, think about that. So here we are a year past, 500,000 people dead and counting. We're going to have 1 million people dead before this is all over. 1 in 325 Americans dead. And we are just now going to try to figure out how this happened.
But I thought this was the China virus. This is what we've been told repeatedly. This came from the bats in Wuhan.
All I know, I don't know anything else, but I know that they set up a committee to do that. So my suspicions in the beginning, I know for sure that experts said it was not from the food market. The majority of the first 50 or 100 cases had no relationship to the food market.
Huh.
And so that's all I know.
See, this is another one of those moments where, nothing that we're being told is truthful. Nothing this administration has come out with has been truthful.
I've been reviewing the book on tyranny, and one of the things he was talking about, it's funny, he actually did a big post on this today that went viral, and I had been reading on this for the last couple of days. The biggest thing about authoritarian dictatorships is they have the lack of truth is their power, and truth is the kryptonite. And the reason is because when you tell lies all the time, then there's no way for anybody to criticize you.
Yeah.
And so that there's just a flowing of lies. But look that up. They have a commission. They're investigating the beginning of the virus. There's also a select congressional committee on the response to the virus, and that's headed up by Representative, is it Senator Clyburn? He is a select committee means that they are not, nobody can mess with them. When you're a select committee, nobody can come in and tell you what to do. They can't shut it down. They can't interfere with it. So being a select committee is a big deal. They're investigating everything about Donald Trump's response to this virus.
And you're right. I mean, the truth is the kryptonite, and one of the things that I think has to happen is, total transparency of everything that came out. And look, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be hurtful. It's going to be troublesome. But we got to have it. And it's going to have. There's going to be a moment where Republicans are going to have to go, yeah, that's it.
One quick thing about the virus itself that I wanted to mention is people are saying, oh, well, this new one is more contagious. That's really great, because I would be worried if it was more deadly. And so I just wanted to share a couple of numbers here. So if you have 10,000 cases of virus, then you look at the result if it's more deadly or if it's more contagious. If it's more deadly, you go from 129 deaths to 219. If it's more contagious, you go from 129 deaths to 1,829. So what I'm trying to say is, like, when it's more contagious, many more people die just because there's a lot more virus out there.
There's a lot more people getting
So
it, right?
it's not good news that it's more contagious, and it also means people need to double up on their efforts, including what's his name at the pharmacy.
Yeah, good point. Last question I've got for you, because there's a lot of people who think, and I've kind of got it in my head that come summertime, if we get people vaccinated, if Joe Biden is able to get 100 million doses into 100 million people in the first 100 days as he's proposing, if we're able to do this, maybe by summertime, life gets back to some bit of normalcy. Yet I'm seeing, Bill Gates saying that the chances of, high school graduation being normal at 99%, saying no, come spring. Where are you?
I think high school graduation is a little early, and I'm kind of thinking with you, we're, August, September, maybe October. And the problem is, well, let's talk about good news. The good news is we're going to have Biden, and he'll be able to create organization and distribution of the virus, and we could even, the vaccine, and we could even exceed our estimates. That would be fantastic. The big issue is everybody getting signed up. Now that Secretary Azar has changed the level down to 65 in those with pre-existing conditions, if you have that, you need to get on the phone with your doctor or somebody and make an appointment. Get in the queue. Get up there and at least get your first shot done. The first shot affords a lot of benefit. You're 50 to 80%. Sure, you're not going to get the virus. Still need to mask, still need to distance, but you're definitely in a much safer zone. We're in a race right now to get as many people vaccinated as possible before these more infectious strains start taking hold. That's what we're just in a flat out run, and every single person needs to help make that happen.
And we need to be doing much more. Trump had talked about using the military to get them out to to putting shots in people's arms. Have we still not used the Defense Production Act to ramp up production of this stuff yet?
Oh my God, no! It's unbelievable. Like my medical people, they don't have masks and gowns again. We've got nurses wearing trash bags. We're a year into this, and
Crazy.
We still have nurses wearing trash bags.
Absolutely crazy. But look, January 20th.
My blood
President-elect.
pressure's up, but I know it will be better.
Yeah, that's the hope. Dr. Sennholz, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Look, as I said, the reality is we need to be doing a lot of things and quickly, not happening as fast as I would like to see. But we got short time. We're on the short time list. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt reestablished the National War Labor Board, just a little over a month before the United States had entered World War II. In the days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Congress voted to join the global conflict. Soon after the war was declared, the president brought together representatives from both business and labor. The president won commitments of no strikes or lockouts during the conflict. He wanted further assurances, however, that the great industrial war machine would continue to run smoothly. He looked back on how labor disputes were handled during World War I as a model. During that earlier global conflict, President Woodrow Wilson had set up a National War Labor Board. President Roosevelt kept the same name for his board, but charged it with even more sweeping powers. The board consisted of 12 members, 4 from labor, 4 from business, and 4 from the general public. But the overall composition of those selected tilted in favor of business. Any labor dispute that might impact the war effort was sent before the board. Since practically the entire United States economy was part of the war engine, this gave the group significant power. In establishing the board, President Roosevelt declared, "The national interest demands that there shall be no interruptions of any work which contributes to the effective prosecution of the war." The board played a decisive role in setting wages for many workers during the war. Labor protested the hardship of stagnant wages, as the raises determined by the board did not keep up with the cost of living, as prices were driven up by wartime scarcities. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like COVID saved this woman from being executed. Evidently, the U.S. government is planning to execute the first female in what I guess is like nearly 7 decades. Now, there's a bunch of legal wranglings going on, but evidently they've stopped the execution of this woman and I guess a couple of others because there had been inmates who had tested positive for COVID-19. And it's one of those moments where you go, it's like the joke of, before they execute you, they rub your arm with a cotton with alcohol because they don't want you to get an infection. They're going to kill you. This is one of those interesting things. I mean, they're going to execute this woman, but have stopped it because people might get sick. Now, I understand it's because the people who are going to be alive are going to get sick, but I guess that's kind of the joke. Evidently, there were 3 executions that were going to be scheduled before Trump leaves office. They are, I guess, going to be on hold, which means that these folks may get reprieve on the other side because Joe Biden is not a death penalty fan. He's an opponent of the federal death penalty, and he may stop it. So, COVID may have saved these people. Yeah. Interesting. Now, personally, I said a million times, and I'm on the record of being anti-death penalty. I have to clarify this every time. I'm against state-sponsored murder. I understand vigilante justice. I am not advocating it. I'm not condoning it. I'm saying I understand it. Someone touched my kids or my wife, there's going to be hell to pay. But I don't think the government should be killing people, especially in a system that is unequal as ours is, and is as wrought with just the wrong kind of incentives, to where it's the poor people who get executed. And are as we're seeing, the people of means seem to get away with things. And finally, good news. Some good news today. A federal judge has upheld the election of Jim Brewster, the incumbent Democrat senator from Western Pennsylvania out in Allegheny County. You may remember the big hubbub here in Pennsylvania as in the Senate. They refused to seat Jim Brewster, who had won, I guess, by 69 votes. We're talking razor-thin election. And not only did they not allow him to be seated, they actually threw the lieutenant governor out of the chambers, threw him out of his job, out of his seat. And, basically in what we come to expect from the Republican Party, their way or the highway, then no negotiating. So Brewster is going to be he will be sworn in this week. It is official, and it's interesting how quickly now this stuff is happening. You had the race in Georgia. You had Purdue concede. All right, you won. Let's move along. You've got this happening. Maybe there's going to be some moments where the Republicans are going to go, hey, we took it too far. What was really about fundraising, list building, and jockeying for position for Trump supporters really turned into something ugly and violent. And I'm hoping they find their souls, or what's left of them. I'm hoping they find a conscience. I hope they find a way to, do what needs to be done in the coming weeks and months as Joe Biden takes the reins and moves us in a direction to where we can fight the pandemic, we can rebuild our economy, and we can get back to some bit of normalcy. I'm hoping for that. I really am. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.